Hey, what's up, real quick? Sorry for the roots. It was a very important phone call from the doctors. So I'm actually going to be going to the hospital to get probably this pickline moved. Um, but you know, life is it's crazy. My life was crazy growing up from the jump. It was, but through the grace of God, like I was given a chance, even though my whole entire life I've been fighting. I've been fighting hard. But you know what? Along with me fighting, God has been there for me. He's been my provider. He's been my way maker. You know, in some aspect of my life, I never gave up. I never gave up a day in my life. I always push myself to be the very best that I can be. I always told myself, hey, listen, you're not going to give up because God is on your side. God got you, but nobody else does. And, being born with the bladder esophagus expedius, being having things that go hand in hand with that, depression, chronic depression at that, then it's to the point where, people that actually are born, people that are born like this, children that are born like this, children that are literally born like this. I know it's hell on parents because you know parents got to see their kids go through it, but through the grace of God, it's he sees us and he sees the parents through the very end. Not only my disabilities, everybody around the world have different disabilities, but this is my story and I'm trying to tell you. So from the ages from when I was first born up until I was 20 something years old, I always was in and out of the hospitals. My very first surgery is when I was like 5. I was in St. Christian Hospital for Children. My mom was there, and they had me in this crib, the little that metal thing for kids. And I was trying to follow my mom to the to the elevator, but the nurse scooped me up, and I was crying after my mom. And I ended up going. I ended up I ended up crying. I was just crying like real bad because I thought I lost my mom. I thought my mom left me. But what happened was the only thing she went out there was to smoke a cigarette. That's the only thing she did. Her favorite brand, Newports. Um, didn't know what my dad was at the time. My brother and my sister still probably was home. But I remember the orderly coming up at 12 midnight, and they let me take they call it a spaceship ride. and they gave me this little cup of drink that makes you feel relaxed or some stuff. Because me as a kid, I wasn't playing well with others. Like that was my thing. I was afraid. Got on the elevator and took me down. I ended up going down the hallway, and in this room, it's white man. They laid me down on this table. It's cold. And they put this warm blanket on me. First, they put the monitors and stuff on me. And I already had one IV in. They had to put another one in. And it always used to hurt when they put it in my hands. So what they ended up doing was the cuff and everything. But when they put that warm blanket on you, then they hit you with the anesthesia. Wow, like a light. I like a light just like that. My surgery lasted from, it was like 5 to 7 hours of surgery. And that was the first of many. I think that was the first of many. And it kept growing, it kept going and going and going. So when I'm in the hospital and I'm around these doctors and nurses, I know the medical lingo that they're speaking. And I let them know I had about 23 surgeries. I had 2 bowel obstructions. I had a calcium deposit moved from out of the artificial bladder. I had 12 revisions of the stoma. Um, what else? I had a hydrocele removal drained. Um, also suffer from hydronephrosis on both kidneys. So it's one of those things where when us kids are born the way we are, especially one that have these disabilities, and it changed the aspect of our lives. It changed our personality. It make us. It turns into a different person because we learn how to understand not only understand life, but to recognize certain wrongs and certain rights. Like me, I never. My thing was I never doubted a person that had a disability. Never. I never talked bad about a person that had a disability. Never. I always see people with disabilities as being normal, normalizing the disability thing. Like, if you got a physical disability, if you have a deformity, if you have a mental disability, these are some of the things that you do to cope with it. We get down on our knees and pray. We pray for emotional healing, physical healing, spiritual healing. We do all that. But these disabilities, it's hard. It's hard. I've been through depression in my life. We're talking about bad depression. To the point that one time I wanted to end my life, but I didn't. I've been in relationships where, they weren't used to being with somebody that had a physical disability. Even though my disability is on the inside, you know, when people look at you differently when you have a disability, you become self-conscious. You become this person that becomes very secure about your body because you're afraid that they might see the scar marks, or they might afraid that you're wearing a urostomy or a colostomy. I'm as human just like you. I'm human just like you. I'm not a robot. I'm not an android. I'm not an alien sent from a different planet to conquer Earth. No. I've been through what everybody else been through on this earth. There's people out here that been through it worse, but this is my story. Going through all the surgeries in my life. Then they died on my parents when I was 15, 16 years old. No, around 15 years old, from a bowel obstruction. Terrible, terrible. It was the first time I ever felt like this. I went to the store, went to the market, got me a sweet potato pie. Came back in the house, I ate it. Then I started feeling cold, started feeling hot, but I started feeling cold, and I started sitting next to the heater with a jacket on. And my mom, She felt something wrong. My mom and my dad felt something wrong. I started puking bad, real bad. My dad was like, "Huh, take this Hall, so go to Hall, get rid of the nasty taste in your mouth, the salty taste." They was like, "Well," then I'm in bed, I'm still puking, stomach hurt, not feeling good, faded in and out, in and out, in and out. So it got to a point where my mom, my dad, hey, listen, we gotta take it to the hospital. And I didn't even know I was dying slowly at the house. I didn't know I was bleeding internally at my house at all. Didn't know. So next thing took place, my parents called 911. First thing they came was the fire truck. My dad was like, hell no. But then it was the after the fire truck, there was a cop car. So I forget how did I get to the hospital, but when I got to the hospital and they put me on that gurney, I was done. Like, I was done. I was, it was like I was dead, but I was unconscious. There was no pulse or anything, but through the grace of God, my dad was able to wake me up with a smack. And with that smack, I woke up and I was up for only like not even seconds, but minutes. I think it was seconds. And they sprayed the back of my throat, put a breathing tube down there, and rushed me to the OR. So I'm in surgery for 12 hours straight. They going in there, they seeing what's going on. Come to find out, my bowel obstruction was caused by uh, um, scar tissue from a previous surgery that I had wrapped around my large intestine. It was choking it. It was gray. It was dead, and that caused me to bleed internally. And that had me throwing up my bowel movement. But it wasn't like the bowel movement you put in your toilet. It was like stuff that I put down, and it was starting to go into that duct. I don't know. Like at the end of the day, it was crazy because I never thought I'll be in the hospital again. I never knew that I was going to fight for my life. But through the grace of God, He saved me. Through the grace of God, He was like, "No, it's not your time. It's not your time, son. It's not your time." So when you in surgery, you're not supposed to hear nothing because you want a heavy anesthesia. So I had my little brother Jamal in the background. Better see my brother. Better see my brother. And I'm just wondering why was his voice was the only one I was hearing. I know my mom, my dad was panicking. The rest of my brothers and sisters probably panicking. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I was in surgery for 12 hours. After the 12 hours of surgery, I woke up and first I was in intensive care in stable condition with a GI tube down my nose. Um, Had to get a blood transfusion because I lost a lot of blood. Started to develop things that I never had. Um, then after that, I spent about a couple weeks in the hospital. Couple weeks. Um, that was one of the worstest things that I have ever been through. But then when I started to go through my adulthood, I had to have revisions of the stoma. I had this thing called a cystoscopy. A cystoscopy is basically when you have an opening. I have an opening right here on the right side. It was on the left side. They had to close that down because it became stenosis. They tried to put it in the middle, but that's when I developed another bowel obstruction due to a surgical error. So I got a stoma here. I no longer self-calf. I want to go back to self-calfing because I was more comfortable self-calfing than wearing the urostomy. So right now I am wearing the urostomy. And, with all that, it's emotional for me because dealing with this day in and day out, it gets hard. It gets real hard because you always at an empath when you're dealing with things like this. When people are dealing with things like this, again, it's my story. The way I deal with this, I try to block out the emotional aspect of it, even though I'm the one that's living with it. I have to deal with it all day, every day. I have to deal with the fact that with this type of problems, having these type of situations, my life is different than other people's, but I try to live a normal life. A normal life. Good sex life. Had a good sex life. Um, had a job. Good job. I push myself to a point in my life where I was like, my disability is not going to define who I am or who I want to be. My disability is not going to be my crutch. As long as I praise Him above, I'll be all right. I have no doubt in my mind that God got better plans for me. But the most thing that I go through on an everyday basis dealing with this problem is you never know. I never know what's going to happen. Never know the problems. And it gets to the point where it's like I try not to get emotional. I hold all that in. Sometimes I just want to cry and just let it all out. But I don't let this life define who I am and who I'm supposed to be. Um, and a lot of people say I have a good heart. I was blessed. I'm walking, talking testimony. Yes, I agree with him, but I also agree with the Most High when He saved me more than once. But it was not the first time I was bleeding. I was bleeding internally for the first time, but then the second time, I had blood literally squirting out my stomach, like squirting, just everywhere. I lost blood. I lost a good amount of blood. Had to get another blood transfusion. Ended up in a hospital. I was in the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. Um, was in that hospital. Uh, I had to go first. The number two trauma center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, is Pennsylvania Hospital. I went to the level two trauma center. I was rushed because I was bleeding out, spring blood. I was surrounded by 12 doctors. It looked like 12 doctors. They had a starter line. They had to stitch me up, and they stitched me up, but I was losing a lot of blood, and I'm prone to infection. So what ended up happening was the urologist came down. It was a urologist that was consulted. No, was it my urologist? I think it was my urologist or urologist that was consulted, and they brought me into the hospital because not only I was bleeding, I had an infection, and everything was ready. And everything. Part two is coming up. I let you. I let y'all dwell on that. I let y'all just understand that.